welcome again. Tonight, we have a special guest tonight who's going to bring us and present to us the secrets. That's right, the secrets that people don't talk to you about underwriting. So Jerome is here to show us how to underwrite and how to be capable and a better underwriter. So Jerome, once again, thank you for your time and taking from your family, and thank you for your time, period. Take it away, Jerome.
Take it away, Jerome. All right, so this is not a passive event. You're not going to sit here and be entertained by me tonight. That was last week. If you didn't get me and Jimbo, you missed out. So this is me asking you questions all night long because I'm not just going to talk at you. So the first thing is the chat. I think it works. I see some people answer my question, but I put 3 questions in the chat. I want you to give me a 1 if you have not done the deal. Drop a 1 in the chat. If you've done 1 deal, give me a 2 in the chat. If you've done multiple multifamily deals, give me 3. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to make sure I know who I'm talking to. And there's a good mix here. If you've never done a deal, you just need to call Vish because he gets them done and he'll be your experienced partner. Doesn't matter what market or what the deal looks like, and his underwriting, he doesn't care, man. Just the money is there. Look at Jerry Sanchez in the building. Okay. So Nicole Pendergrass, wait, I feel like you've done more deals than that. Sam did 2 deals. Sam still was a Pratt graduate of the Myers Methods of Multifamily Investing course. I saw Dolly in here too. So look, this is going to be fun. I like engagement. And so this presentation will be better if you talk back to me and you ask questions. Is that fair? Can I get a thumbs up? Can I get a head nod? Or do I have to talk to myself and pretend like I'm the only one here, just me and Lawrence recording an episode? All right. So what I have done is I'm going to give you a part of a presentation or a part of a class that if you were in our multifamily investing course, you would get. It's 11 weeks. We go for a couple of hours every night, or I guess it's once a week. And I felt like that was the most cohesive way that I could do this in the brief amount of time that I have to share with you tonight. Now, I'm not just going to talk about underwriting. I'm going to give you some context and then go into underwriting because I do see that there's a lot of ones in the chat, and I think it would be beneficial that we have a common language as we go through this. As we go, ask questions, right? Will you be able to go underwrite a deal after this? You won't. Will you know some questions that you probably should ask that you may not be asking? You absolutely will. And I don't want to give anybody a false impression like you can go do your own deal and be fully competent as a multifamily investor after this, because that's just not true. A lot of people think that this business is really easy. They think that once you find a deal that everything is done, and there's so much more that goes into the business. And so I don't want it to lead anybody down the path of false belief, because that is not my game. I've really spent a lot of time trying to make sure people get the ins and outs of this thing so they don't get taken advantage of. And something that I've been really passionate about, because I've watched a lot of people spend a whole lot of money to get an incomplete solution and then be frustrated because that thing that they were trying to use for generational wealth became a debt. So I'm gonna dive into the presentation. Lawrence, look at that thing climbing, man. We're up to 42 people tonight, man. Would you be kind enough to allow me to share so I can let these folks see a slide or two? I think I have enough content for the next 8 hours. So I hope you guys brought your pillow and your blanket, because we're gonna be here all night long. All right. So as I mentioned already, this is from our course. Let me see if I can get this thing to blow up a little bit and we'll get rocking and rolling. Oh man, I stopped the share. Let me resume the share. All right, so this is from our multifamily kickstart course. I think it's module 4 or 5 in it. You won't get the whole thing, but you'll get a good portion of it tonight. And so this is about finding a deal. So there's a 4-step process, or our framework is 4 steps: find, fund, fix, and flip. And finding, if I think I remember my slides correctly, yeah. So finding goes from you going your initial search, and that we'll talk about the steps involved with that before we get into the analysis. Once you search, you'll end up with the lead. I don't say that you have a deal from the beginning. You'll have a lead. It's something that you will do some math against. It's a property that you'll go visit. It's a bunch of things, but it's not a deal yet because you don't know if you actually have the chance to make money. Does that make sense? Can I have a yes in the chat? Can I have a no? Can I have anything to let me know that I haven't put you to sleep? Thank you, Nicole. She's my friend in Texas. We roll deep. All right. So once you find a lead, you want to analyze that lead. If it makes anywhere remotely close to making some sense, then you want to tour that deal. Unless you're brand new. If you drop the one in the chat, you want to go tour every property that you possibly can. What are you talking about, Jerome? Go tour every property you can so you can get familiar with multifamily properties. You can see how people are operating the deals. You'll meet brokers. You'll expand your network. I can keep going down the list of the things. But if you have a one in the chat, you want to get as much time on property as possible. Some people are like, oh, yeah, that's a waste of my time. It's not. It's knowledge that you can use to get familiar with your market, to understand properties and what's happening in them and what they'll rent for. And then you'll be able to use that to make better assumptions when you're modeling or doing underwriting. Once you tour the property, you'll have more data than you did when you were just doing it based on the offering memorandum or whatever financials were provided by the seller. So you go back through and you reanalyze the deal. Then at that point, what we teach people to do is send a letter of intent or a LOI. That LOI says, hey, Mr. Owner, or hey, Mr. Broker, we want to buy this property. It gives the major terms of that deal. And then you guys negotiate a little bit. And then from there, you negotiate a purchase and sell agreement or a contract. And by doing that, you will actually have a legal interest in the property. And for those of you who have ever done any wholesaling, you know that that legal interest actually protects you as you start expending capital to find out whether or not you're actually going to buy this property. My stuff's stuck on the chat. All right. So what does it say? Deal sources, right? A lot of people think the only place that you can get a deal is on MLS or commercial MLS like LoopNet or Crexi, City Feed, some of those other ones out there. But there's so many more options. And I encourage you, especially in the market that we're in, that you explore those. So commercial brokers are one, and you'll find that commercial brokers have online listings. They may also have some things on auction sites. And then there's these things called off-market deals or pocket listings. I think there's a common misconception that because something's a pocket listing, that means that it's a good deal. A lot of times pocket listings are traded for more than what they would get if they were marketed actively. So just because a broker says, hey, I haven't taken this to market does not mean that you're getting the deal at a discount. Some of the service providers that are in the industry may have access to deals for you. So if you've got relationships with property managers, I talk to mine regularly and say, hey, who's struggling? Who's ready to get out of the business? Because we want to take those deals over. Title companies may have them. Community banks. Why community banks, Jerome? Well, community banks don't sell their loans. And so if they got an asset that's not performing, they may foreclose on that. And then now they're in the property management business, which they don't want to be in. And so they'll have a real estate group that is responsible for divesting those assets once they take them in. The network, right? You're here at the meetup tonight. Some folks are having conferences. I have one. It's February 18th through the 20th. And Lawrence is speaking at it. Nicole's speaking at it. I think there are a few other people. Tanisha, she was in here. She's speaking at it as well. And then there's like RIA associations. You know, I feel like meetups are quickly outpacing what have traditionally been real estate investor associations or RIAs. And so you want to get in those networks because if you're around other people who are doing deals, you're more likely to come across a lead or a deal. My favorite one, and the one that I encourage people to do the most, is direct to owner marketing. And I think there are really two ways that happens. Somebody may throw in a third one, and that's okay. But the two that I talk about the most are phone calls and mailers. The third one that people talk about from time to time is text messaging. There's a bunch of FTC regulations out there. And so I get a little leery about those because I don't fully understand those laws. And I don't want to have a lawsuit brought against me because I sent a text to somebody using an automated software and they were on this do not call list and I didn't scrub the list, right? So I stay away from text, but I will call people, I will phone them, or I will send them a piece of mail and get direct to the seller, which means I don't have to pay for the broker and some of the other fees, like, and I guess I can't call them fees. I don't have to compete with people like Lawrence and Vish who are ready to pay whatever they need to pay in order to get a deal done. I'm just picking with you guys. You guys buy great deals. All right, so not going to do that. Direct mail and cold calling. All right, so I told you this is what I like to do. Some people are like, what's direct mail? Direct mail is exactly what that is. So that's literally my handwriting. I handwrite the address on the envelopes and I stuff the letter in and I put it in the mailbox after putting a stamp in it. And I send it to the address of record for the person that owns the property. And I was having a conversation with somebody today who didn't want to do that. And I said, you can outsource it and pay more money. Sometimes it's like $800 or something, depending on how many you're dropping. Or you can make the investment of your time and do this at a much lower cost. Totally up to you, but the handwriting piece is what gets it open. Some people are looking for efficiency. This is redundant work. It's not effective. The most profitable part of the business is being able to find deals. If you don't have any experience, and I guess I need to give you the framework for that. Every investor is trying to overcome 4 things: knowledge, deal flow, experience, and capital. And you need to overcome those 4 things in that order: knowledge, deal flow, experience, and capital. Some people say, I can't do a deal because I don't have any money. It doesn't matter if you don't have money. It doesn't matter if you don't have an experienced partner, because you're not going to get the bank to write a check. They need an experienced partner before they write a check. Experienced partner is not coming unless you have a deal, right? I still remember when I was trying to do my first deal, I didn't write the contract. And the guy was like, well, what are you going to bring to the table, Jerome? I said, well, we'll figure it out. And he kept asking me over and over again. And he went off and wrote the contract himself. And I was on the sidelines because I didn't control the deal. I didn't have that. We talked about the LOI. I didn't negotiate the deal. So I had nothing really to offer to the person. That's not completely true, but in my understanding of the world at that point, I really didn't have anything else to offer. The person who controls the deal controls their destiny. Never forget that. The way that you become valuable and get somebody to partner with you is to get a deal that is profitable under contract, and then go take that to somebody who has experience so that you can raise money against it. And then the foundational level is knowledge. There's a lot of people who think that they're going to retire or get wealthy, and they haven't made the investment in the knowledge necessary to be able to evaluate a deal. It does me no good as an experienced operator for you to send me something that you saw on a email blast from a broker that went to, let's call it 300 people. I got the same email. You didn't find the deal, right? There's no reason for me to bring you along on that. But if you call Jimbo, and not Jimbo that was on last week, but Jimbo, the owner, and he's ready to exit the property because he's got a tremendous amount of trapped equity and he isn't making any money on his property because people are leaning on the fact that there's some rent relief related to COVID, he may want to free up that equity, and we may be able to buy that property at a discount so that he can get to the dollars that are locked up for his retirement. And we but get to buy that cash flow. He gets his equity. It's a win-win-win for everybody. And you get a piece because you found it. Everybody wins in that scenario. All right. For the mailing piece, right? You want to get a mailing list, and there's a lot of different ways you can come across that list. I won't dive into them here, but the sources for those: local title companies, list stores. There's some direct mail tools online. Open letter marketing is another website, and then you can also go to your county GIS. Cold calling is scary for a lot of people, but I think it is the fastest way to find out whether or not you have a deal, right? If you can get in a person's cell phone, you can get in their pocket, you can get to a place where you know whether or not they even consider an offer. And if they're willing to consider an offer, then you can start walking down this path and negotiate something that can work out for both of you. When you get to the owner, the question that you need to ask so that you can actually do some financial modeling is, how can I get my hands on a copy of your rent roll and the trailing 12 financials, or T12? If you can get those two pieces, you are well on your way to getting a deal closed. Any questions at this point? Drop them in the chat if you got questions. All right. Did I do this? Okay. So let's go a little bit deeper. You're like, Jerome, why are you doing this? Well, all these questions on this slide are things that will go into your model. So the first one, Wayne, local GIS, graphical information system. So every city, I can't say every city, the vast majority of cities will have a department within the local government that maps all of the properties. And it has the property owner name, the address, probably some value, acreage associated with the parcel, zoning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can get a copy of that data. Some of it's free, others you have to pay for, but you can get a copy of that data. And it's the same thing that all of those companies that generate lists, they're pulling off of the same thing. It's all publicly available information. It's just a matter of, is it filtered? Is there other stuff added to the entries? Or are you just going to get the raw data? All right, so jumping back to what we're talking about here with the cold calling. We want to get this information from the seller because I, as a buyer, buy based on actuals, right? If you get an offering memorandum from a broker, there's going to be a pro forma. That pro forma, as Jumbo and I talked about last night, was littered or is littered with a bunch of thoughts, a bunch of assumptions that make the property look favorable. I don't reward people for work they didn't do. So if the NOI isn't the actual NOI, the pro forma NOI isn't equal to the actual NOI, I don't use the pro forma NOI because it's always going to be higher than what the actual is. All right, so we want to get the capital expenditures that have happened since the property has been purchased. Why? Because I don't have to do it. If they've renovated units, if they've replaced the roof, if they've fixed the parking lot, they put up fences, if they've picked the thing, whatever they've done, the investment that they've made, just know that I don't have to do that when I buy it. So I don't need to account for it in my model. The second question, you don't have to ask because you probably know already, but it's something to have a conversation about. So when did you purchase the property? Why are you interested in selling it, or why are you willing to sell it? Do you have a desired sales price? A lot of times sellers will be a little squeamish about that, but if you can get that number for them, then you know what they want. Through analysis, we'll know what we can pay. And then you figure out if you can make the gap work, if there is a gap. If they say they are not interested in selling, you want to find out more information as why they aren't interested in selling at the time. They could say, hey, I just sold something else, or this is my last property. You want to know why they don't want to sell it, because if that condition changes, you want them to let you know, or you want to reach out, right? Sometimes people won't want to sell until after they do their taxes. So you'll see stuff go on market in April because they saw that the property was a loser and their accountant said, go ahead and let this one go. And then I think the biggest thing is you want to figure out ways where you can be of benefit to the owner. It's not just the sales price a lot of the times. There's other things that could influence the owner's decision in order to open up and be willing to sell. I'll put this in because I don't think you'll see it anywhere else. Other places where you can find deals: Craigslist, driving for dollars in the market. If you can buy in your own backyard, you're looking for signs of distress, landscape not being maintained, fading or peeling paint, other deferred maintenance, broken down cars in the parking lot. If you see that stuff, you know that the owner isn't really paying attention to the property. And because they aren't paying attention to the property, or they're not paying attention to the property because they're probably not making that much money. If they're not making that much money, then they're probably open to sell. Remember, a lot of the landlords bought properties and their net worth is tied up in the property because they've paid down the mortgage, usually not new owners. This one's going to become more and more prevalent, and the can keeps getting kicked down the road, but I think the roosters are getting ready to roost here. Eviction court. So people have not been paying their rent because of COVID, regardless of what your favorite guru says. People are impacted. I'm one of them, so I know it's real. And landlords are getting fed up. They're getting tired of waiting on COVID relief dollars. And so they're starting to file for eviction. If you're watching the eviction court docket and you're seeing a particular property or a particular company continue to come up over and over again, you probably want to reach out to them. Now, mind you, if a property manager is doing it, the property manager could be doing it for a bunch of different properties across this locality that they're working in. But if it's an owner and you can get direct to that owner, or if the addresses of the residents is in a specific complex, then you know that that person is probably pretty interested in exploring other options because they're not getting the income that they desire. Building code violations, you want to check those out, right? They're not taking care of the property for a reason. Usually it's because they're not making enough money to fix it. And so one of the things that I see, and I'll just throw this out there for folks, is if rents are less than $500 a month, the person who owns the property doesn't have enough income to maintain the property. And so they start just letting things go. And so if you can find stuff in that price range, you can pretty quickly bump rents up to what market is, because market is not 500, and then begin to take care of the property the way it needs to be. Owners facing foreclosure. It's another big one. I think there are going to be some people who have run out of reserves and they didn't get their COVID dollars. And so they're going to be interested in doing something else with their property, even if it's just giving it back to the people who gave them the loan on it. So in the course, we would do some role playing, but we're going to skip over that for tonight. So here's the thing, right? If you don't get anything else from this presentation, get this one. 5-minute preliminary evaluation. It takes me about 45 seconds to do it, but here's what you can do to get a ballpark on the property before you ever call an owner or before you ever talk to one. You get the unit count, right? So let's say I got a 10 unit. You get a unit count, 10 units times 12 months in a year. And the average rent, let's call it $1,000. And I'm not good at math, but 1,000 times 10 is $10,000 times 12. That's $120,000 in gross potential rent for the year. I take that gross potential rent and I multiply it by 50%. That 50% is to account for the expenses that the property would encounter. Will it be more? Probably, but we're just trying to get a ballpark. So now my gross potential rent went from 120,000 down to 60,000, right? From there, you want to take the NOI and divide it by the cap rate of whatever property class you are buying. And that would be your target purchase price. And so let's just say I'm going to buy a D-class property and I got $60,000 of net operating income. That would mean that I would be willing to pay $600,000 for that property, because I would divide 60,000 by 10%. Now give me $600,000 purchase price. Do I need to go through that again for anybody? Give me a 1 if I should do it again. Give me a 2 if you got it. Silence. 2. I got a 1. I only need 1. I got 1. So I got to go through it again. Unit count. 10 units, right? And so you're doing the number of units times the number of months times the amount of money that you're charging per unit per month. So 10 units times 12 months, that's 120 times $1,000 a month. So $120,000 a year gives you your gross potential rent. When you have your gross potential rent, we're going to say that we're going to spend half of that money on expenses. It could be a little bit more depending on what type of property it is. But for the sake of this example, we're going to say it's just 50%. So 120 times 50% is $60,000. That $60,000 is your net operating income. So you want to take your net operating income and divide it by the cap rate. The cap rate for this building, for simplicity's sake, because I'm not that great at math, is 10%. So if you take that $60,000 and divide it by 10%, you should get $600,000. And that is the ballpark on what you should be willing to pay for that property, assuming that you don't have any deferred maintenance issues that you have to deal with or any of the other things. Now, that lease amount is the actual lease amount that the units are being rented for right now. That is not market rent. That is what are the units being rented for right now. The class is of the building. The class is of the building. We're not doing the class of the neighborhood. We're deciding on market and neighborhood before we actually get to the property. Good question, Marina. The cap rate is going to be determined on the class of the property. And I want to, so a A-class property is going to be something that's brand new. A B-class property is going to be something that's less than 25 years old. It's really well maintained, but it's not new. C-class properties, I think C-class is getting extended. At one point, it was 35 years. I think some people are taking it up to 50 now because the housing stock is aging. And then D-class properties are going to be ones that are in disrepair. They probably got a bunch of boarded up units. They probably have some vacancy. You would expect to see drugs and prostitution and a bunch of other stuff in those properties. Hopefully that helps Sue Ann. Give me a yes if that helps, Sue Ann. No, yes, Sue Ann. Okay, great. There's a whole lot more technical definition for this, but I want to try to get through this for the sake of the conversation. All right, I'm not going to go through the belly to belly piece. This is what you would do after you have your number and you're going in to talk with the seller. One thing I will tell you though, it doesn't matter what you're doing, right? There's always going to be a little bit of fear. There's always going to be a little bit of hesitation. Do I know enough? Am I going to make a fool of myself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't matter. You have to take some action. Now, whether you take that action by yourself or you take that action with somebody else in the drive or the passenger seat while you're driving your car, doesn't matter. But you need to take action because if not, nothing in your life will change. All right. So you went on this tour because you are a new person. You're a person who put a 1 in the chat. You went on the tour and you checked out some things, right? You saw the condition of the roof. You don't get any additional rent because you replace a roof. So just know that if you got to replace a roof, that you need to figure out how to get the current owner to pay for that. You want to check the condition of the parking lot. Another thing that you can't come back after you go on the contract and say, hey, you didn't take care of this. You need to account for that in your price. It is expensive and you don't get to charge any additional rent for fixing the parking lot. The deferred maintenance items, those are things that the current owner should take care of. You want them to take care of them before you take the property over. If there are units that are down, non-revenue producing units, maybe there's issues with the plumbing, maybe there's electrical, maybe needs renovated, maybe there's no appliances, whatever the case is, you need to know about all those. And if there's any other challenges, you want to account for those. And this is where the modeling gets dicey because people will assign different numbers to all these things. They will leave out things that are not being considered. And when you get to the place where you're actually operating the property, it shows up and you have to pay the piper. All right. So you had an initial financial analysis and we skipped over that step so that we could get to this place. The question that you have to ask yourself after you do the tour is, do you still want the property? After you've walked through it, is this a place where you see the opportunity to transform it? Is this a place where you think it's always going to be the way it is and you can't improve the value of the property? Do you want the headache that's going to come with the property? Is it too much work? If you answer in a way that makes you not want to have the property, then it's your turn to exit and just move on to the next thing. Then once you decide whether or not you want it, this is yes or no question, you go and look back at, well, what's the owner want for it? The final step is, how much can I pay? What the owner wants doesn't really matter until it comes to negotiation. What can I pay is more important. I'm watching a lot of people stretch on deals. They're reaching. I got to get it closed. I got to get to the LinkedIn post that we got something done. I got to show people on Facebook that I'm doing due diligence on a property. And there are going to be some people who have bought deals and the market's not going to save them. And it's one of my biggest fears right now in the marketplace, because I know how many people out there want to change the trajectory of their family. And this investment is going to become a burden. And there are some people who are not going to be well capitalized. And if they get caught in a pinch, they could end up losing the property. And I don't even want to call it losing the property. They could end up being foreclosed on and lose hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, depending on how big the deal is. And for most people, it won't be all their own money. And then they'll tarnish this beautiful asset class that is allowing people to attain financial freedom. So this is so important as we move into it. All right. So now I'm showing you a model. April asked, in reference to cold calling, what are some major red flags that you turn away from? I don't turn away from anything in cold calling. I want to get to every deal possible. So red flags for me only come up when I get to the property. Except for, I take that back. There is one. If the owner says they don't have any financials, I'm always out. I'm always out if the seller can't provide financials. Last week, Jimbo said, them financials all mixed up like a bowl of gumbo. And, or maybe he said a pot of spaghetti. I don't know which one he used last week, but he uses them pretty regularly with me when he's trying to get me to buy something that doesn't have actual accurate records of the financial performance. The reason why we buy apartment buildings is because it is a business that has been stood up and it's got historical records of the performance. And so you can use that to put a valuation on it. The moment that you get away from the financial performance of the asset and start using other metrics to buy the property, you get yourself in a ton of trouble. And I'll be honest with you, if you're getting debt from a lending institution, the appraiser is not going to be very favorable in their opinion of the property's valuation if they don't have those records available to them. And so when you hear about people getting in positions where their lender shorted them however many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, it's because the property didn't appraise. All right, so I use Michael Blank's syndicated deal analyzer, or a old version of that we modified. And you can get that from Michael Blank somewhere. You just type his name in and type in analyzer. And if you want to download that, you can. I don't get anything from that. He doesn't even know that I recommend it. It's okay though. I think it's a pretty good product. So there are 4 scenarios that we model when we look at deals. There's the marketing package. That is whatever you got from the seller, or if you happen to be working with a broker on the deal, what you got from the broker. My version, this is the one I don't share with this is the one that I share with a property manager. It is the most aggressive one. It's the one where it shows that we're going to make the most money. And it may or may not show that on this one, but that is how I do it today. There's a projected. This is the one I share with my partners. Now, if you're syndicating, this would be the one that you give to the LPs and you put into your presentation. If you're doing a joint venture, this is the one I would share with the partners that are coming in the deal after you find it. And then the offer. The offer is the most conservative one. Everything is going wrong with the offer. And if your seller ever asks, well, how are you coming up with this number? You can more than willingly share this with them. And I can walk through, and I probably won't walk through all the numbers, but we'll walk through some of these to get it in a good place. So, in here, you have the purchase price. What are they asking? What are you saying that you're going to pay for it? So the marketing package wanted it at 425. My version says I want to try to get it for 410. I'm telling my partners, hey, 415. Maybe the offer to see how things will work would be at 420. At the end of the day, I'm going to do everything I can to get this thing for as cheap as possible. And so I probably wouldn't start at 400 if they ask for 425. I'm probably in the three somethings, but that doesn't mean you should do what I do, because I'm usually the only game in town when I'm making offers on deals. The number of units is only important because it helps you calculate the price per unit. Another like quick and fast metric or measure to figure out whether or not the deal makes sense is to take your price per unit and multiply it by 1%. And so here, if the units aren't renting for more than $425 a month, you probably can't make money at that property. So the asking price is too high. There are people who are doing less, and this is the 1% rule. It gets you in the ballpark. By no means is it the right way to analyze a deal, but it'll let you know if you're even close or if you should even begin to consider it. Down payment. I like to go max leverage. So I put in 20%. Some loans you'll only be able to get 75%. There are others that will be 70 or 65%. But when I'm doing these deals, I want to load up the debt because I think money's pretty cheap right now. And so you take that 20%, you multiply it by the $425,000, that gives you an $85,000 down payment, which means your loan balance will be $340,000. And based on what the broker gave me, it's a $40,000 rehab. And I don't know what that number comes from in this situation. Let's call it $5,000 a unit, and we're going to renovate 8 units. Estimated repairs. Closing costs, a round number of 2.5%. And so you want to figure out, well, how much money do we need to close the deal? Now, how much money do we need to raise? How much money do we need to close the deal? $135,625. Where'd that number come from, Jerome? 340. No, 85 plus 40 is 125 plus 10. 625 gives you 135, 625. So closing costs plus estimated repairs plus down payment gives you what you need. Now, if somebody said, Jerome, well, how much do I need in commitments to close this deal? I would tell them 300K, especially if it's your first deal. A lot of people will tell you they'll give you money, but that is not true. And you won't find that out until it's time for them to send the wire transfer or write the check. So if somebody came to me and was like, how much do I need to raise for this deal? I tell them 300, but what you need to get this thing closed is 135, 625. So I'll come back to that question, Desmond, because it's one that I think is an advanced selling technique. So the total acquisition cost, even though we showed 425, we still have to pay our closing costs, and we still need money for repairs. So that's how we get to this 475, 625. 425 plus 40 plus 10 should equal this number. Simple enough? I hope so. All right, so then we get down to the income. So these units are renting for $500 on average, right? $500 on average. So if you do the 1% rule, I think we're okay because 500 is greater than $425. I'm feeling good about this one. I want to go ahead and buy this. This is actually a deal that we bought, believe it or not. So the gross potential income here is 60 grand, right? So 10 units times $500 times 12 months Yep. $5,000 a month times 12 months equals $60,000. That's the gross potential rent. Vacancy is something that most people don't ever talk about because it's going to be rented 100% of the time every month. It's not true. And if you're buying a property with a smaller door count, I can tell you that your vacancy is not going to be 2 or 3%. It's going to be more like 10, maybe 15. If you're doing a rehab project, it could be 20 or 30 or 35 if you're not careful. So you want to make sure that you model vacancy into the deal. There's also opportunity for bad debt and a bunch of other stuff. So these are off a little bit, but the $60,000 in gross potential rent minus the $9,000 gives you $51,000 in effective gross income. So your total net income, assuming you don't have washers and dryers, pet rent, a garage to lease, storage units, some of this other stuff. I don't ever model the supplemental income. I always model just the rent. I want the property to stand on its own too. But we're saying our net income is 51 grand. Nicole, I'll come back to that question. All right. So this is your income. Income. When you're doing deals, there's two ways that you can grow the net operating income. Let me go back up here to my favorite formula. All right. So the way that you make purchase price bigger, the one that you can control, is growing the net operating income. And that's based on your rents. You can increase your rents or you can decrease your expenses, or in the ideal world, you do both. And so you create a bigger gap. That gap is your net operating income. The one that you can't control that impacts purchase price is the cap rate. That is based on what other things trade in the market, right? So you may have deals trading at 4 caps or 6 caps or 10 caps. That's not something you can control. And it's made a lot of people look like they're great operators when in fact they might be mediocre at best. So just remember, we're trying to grow net operating income. And so the traditional webinar is going to say, hey, we're going to take this property over. It's $200 under market. So we're going to raise rents up to market rate. And we're probably going to have to do a renovation in order to get that. And then the property manager is awful. They're terrible. They don't know what they're doing. They're asleep at the wheel and they just have expenses running rampant. And so we're going to get those expenses under control and we're going to make this property worth more money. And then we're going to have this big fat exit and you're going to get cash flow along the way. That's the way that the story goes. Doesn't matter what webinar you are. And they're going to tell you that you're going to get a 15% IRR and you're going to have your 8 pref. That's what people are doing right now. Doesn't matter where the deal is. It's always the same. So the expense piece is the next place that we go. And so the ones that you have to be really careful about are real estate taxes and insurance. If you buy a property in a city where they reassess commercial property when it trades, when it sells, then you need to be prepared to pay increased taxes based on your purchase price. If it's on a 3-year cycle or a 5-year cycle, or they do it whenever they get ready, you need to know that so that you can put the increased taxes in your financial model. If you do not do this, because this is an expense, you will never be able to make that up in the NOI. Expenses that get reduced or eliminated drop straight down to the bottom. What you'll see some people talk about is, oh, I raised the rents by $100 on a 10-unit property on all 10 units. And so that's $1,000 a month. That $1,000 a month times 12 months is $12,000 for the year. I just raised on a 10 cap property, I just raised the value of my property by $120,000. The issue with that is there are expenses associated with that new income. And so if somebody tells you that you're going to capture all the income and that's going to be added to NOI, I can tell you that that's not true. That is not true. There's going to be some expenses that have to be taken from that. However, if there is an expense that you can reduce or eliminate, that will drop straight down to your NOI. Okay. So real estate taxes, you want to make sure you understand how they're going to change as you own the property. I remember getting ready to buy a deal and the property owner bought it out of foreclosure 7 years ago. And the rate was, I don't know, I think he had $10,000 in for what he paid in the previous year. And he was selling a property that he bought for 2 million to me for a little over 6 million. When I looked at the taxes, I think the taxes were going to be $70,000 based on that purchase price. And I couldn't make up for that difference, right? 60,000, or yeah, let's call it $60,000 difference on a 10 cap property, $600,000 in valuation. So if he wanted to sell the property for 6.5, and I'm saying, hey, you got $600,000 of NOI that I can't, or valuation that I can't take care of because I've got $60,000 in new expenses because of what I paid for this thing, I'm stuck at 5.9, right? That's a $600,000 spread. He wants 6.5. I'm at 5.9 because of the real estate taxes, the new taxes that I think I'll have to pay when I buy the property. I can't bridge that gap, and I can't pretend like taxes aren't going to go up if I own the property. So be really careful when you're doing stuff like that, because it may seem like a small number until you actually see how it impacts your net operating income. And I'm going to say that over and over again because net operating income is the whole game for this thing. Insurance, if it's had claims, if it's in Texas or Florida, be really careful because those rates they're jumping up and being pretty aggressive. Water and sewer, expect about $40 per month per unit. You can drop it down to $400 per year if you want, but $40 per month per unit is where you should expect water to be. And why is that important, Jerome? Well, if you get somebody to give you financials and they're paying $70 a month in water for the property, and they haven't upgraded the toilets, they haven't replaced the shower heads, they haven't replaced the faucets, there's a pretty large chance that they've got leaks and drips, and it is just eating up their income. And so you can come in and execute a water efficiency plan and raise the net operating income because you won't be overpaying for water long term. If you have to pay the electricity, you want to make sure that you have that number in. And we think about $100 per unit per month is a pretty good place to be. And if you got common area lights, we throw in $100. And this is until you can prove otherwise with the bills from the property owner. Trash removal, we usually throw in $200 per unit. And that can be high or low, but we want to get the ballpark. All these things you want to actually get quotes on if there's a vendor, so that you can get the final number on your property. Know this: do not put the cheapest vendor in, because if you hire the cheap vendor and then you cannot use them because they don't perform, you don't have any latitude in your budget or in your pro forma to go to the next most expensive person. Right? A lot of times, because we're trying to make the deal work, we're trying to squeeze everything out of it. You don't want to be precise on these numbers. You want to leave yourself an opportunity to adjust. You want to leave yourself an opportunity to wiggle around a little bit in case things don't go exactly as you plan for them to go. Management fee. Listen, man, if you're just getting started and the property owner is showing you that management fees are 6%, pretty safe to say that your property management costs are not going to be 6%. And again, if you have that vendor and it doesn't work out, you want to have some flexibility so that you can move that up and actually be able to afford to pay that property manager. The thing that I see most is when people are managing their own property. You're probably not that good at it. So while you think you're saving that 8 or 10%, you're not putting a dollar amount on your time. You're not putting a dollar amount on the ability to get into that property manager's network and their vendors. You're not to thinking about the opportunity costs on not working on your next deal while the property manager is doing the day-to-day on your existing deal. The margins in property management are really small. So if you're spending your time on $10 tasks, you can't do the $100,000 and $10,000 task. Finding new deals is a $10,000 task, if not more. Contract services, that's landscaping, bunch of other stuff, right? Legal fees, we do $150 per unit per year. If you're doing a ton of evictions, you've got bigger problems. So you want to be careful with that, but you want to have some dollars in just in case you have to evict somebody. For me, it costs literally $150 to evict somebody. I got to pay court costs of $120, and then I pay the sheriff like $129 or something like that. Maybe it's $39 to come in and actually do the lockout and get people out of the property. And then replacement reserves. This is not something you see a whole lot. People try to drop this down below the net operating income line so that they can boost their income. I don't do that. And so we budget $300 per unit per year. So on this 10-unit property, we're going to save $3,000 a month for those big ticket expenses. I just had a panel box go out that I had to replace earlier this month. Maybe it's the roof, maybe it's work on the parking lot. Whatever the thing is, for those capital expenses, you want to have some money squirreled away. So these are not hard and fast rules, but they will give you some guidance so you can start looking at deals and get you going towards getting that first or that next deal closed. All right. So let's put some of these numbers in, right? Let's put some of these numbers in, right? So the real estate taxes, that was on the other page, right? I have 4,200 in. I decided that the actual number was 4,171. Insurance, got a quote in from Jeremy Goodrich at Shine Insurance. He's got this really cool tool called Insurance Ballpark. You can just put in the address in, answer a few questions, and almost immediately you can get a quote on your insurance. It's a really solid tool. So if you don't already have a relationship with the agent, or even if you do and you don't feel like bothering them, you can just type in the address of this thing you got a lead on, and he'll get one out to you right away. Water and sewer, we threw in 250, which I think is pretty low, but that must mean that we're not paying any of those expenses. The 250 on the electric, again, we're not paying any of those expenses, but we don't pretend that we won't ever have to cover a bill. So we want to put some dollars in for that. Gas, there's no gas at this property. The trash removal, I think this is a little heavy, but maybe it's what we saw. So we threw in the 2,400 management fee. We got a great relationship with our property manager, so they charge us 8%. We've got a decent sized portfolio in this market, so they took care of us. And somebody could charge us 10%, but we think our portfolio is big enough where we can negotiate that down a little bit. Legal fees, 250. We it's probably on the rosy side. I would probably put some more dollars in, but we're saying we're going to do 2 evictions over the course of a year, and maybe somebody's going to pay us back for that. Repairs and maintenance. We were aggressive on this. So what you typically see with repairs and maintenance is it's about 10% of your gross income. It's about 10% of your gross income. When you see people that are showing you repairs and maintenance that are less than 5%, or maybe even up to 7%, you know that they are not making the investment in the property necessary to keep it going. Okay. So you want to get these above 10% when you're doing your model to make sure that you can take care of the property the way it needs to be taken care of. General admin, we just throw a number in. Maybe we need to do some paper. Maybe we can get a tax return done if it's really simple. Whatever the case is, you want to have some money allocated for that. And then we got the big old $300 per month or per year per unit to cover us from a capital expense perspective. Now that number is high for people who do agency loans. They can get it down to 200, 250. But for us, we're working a community bank. We say 3,000. So you add up all those expenses, you get to $25,506. And whoop-de-doo, look at that. It's a 50% expense ratio, man. So if you think back when I told you, hey, let's use this really 5-minute deal analysis, we were able to get that done over here. Now, will these numbers be exact? No. In fact, the only thing that I know is that it won't be these numbers when I actually go through and start operating the property. But this gives me a level of confidence that I'm going to be somewhere around this range when I get to the end of the road. And so $25,000 in expenses. And then we've got another $25,000 in debt service. And the way I like to describe this is if I've got a pizza, I've got 4 slices, right? My mom used to give me personal pan pizzas after I got a good report card or after I finished reading a book for book club, and I would be really excited. Now, I wish I kind of knew about this when I was a kid because it was a shock when I became an adult. So all the money that I made on my property is the whole pizza. Now, what happens is expenses take half of that, right? Expenses take half of that. So now I only have 2 slices of my pizza. And now I'm sad. But it gets worse because now I got to pay the bank because I borrowed money. So I take another slice of my pizza away. And so I only got one slice of my pizza left, 25% left. If you do that, then you'll have profit. But what happens is, in this case, right, I didn't have $100,000 of income. I had $60,000 of income or something like that. So we end up with a debt service coverage ratio of 1.02. If I had a whole slice of pizza, if I had 25% left, my debt service coverage ratio would be 1.25. Why does that matter? Because that's what most banks are looking for. They're looking for the debt service coverage ratio to be above 1.25. They want the debt service coverage ratio to be above 1.25. That means you're making money. What we personally teach people to do is try to get their debt service coverage ratio above 1.5. That gives you cushion in case something goes wrong or is unexpected. So the thing that's scary about this deal, based on the marketing package, is it was only going to make $439 after you pay everything. The cash on cash return was 0.32. Nobody wants to do this deal. My version is a little bit better. We end up at 4,000. The cash on cash return is 3.48. Here, 7.72. And these are just year one, right? These are just year one metrics. These are just year one metrics. It gets better with time because I'm going to raise the rents and hold expenses the same or reduce them. But going into the deal, this makes me pretty sad. I think on this one, because I want to illustrate the point, I forced it. So I needed to figure out what I needed to do in order to get this deal to be above the 1.25. Because if I do that, then I feel comfortable taking it to my partners and I feel comfortable taking it to the bank. Here's kind of, I think this is the last slide I'll share with you. Maybe I'll do one more, but this is probably one of the last slides I'll share with you. Getting pretty close to it. So we have the NOI divided by the cap rate. These are cap rates, 6, 6.65, 7, 7.5. You will see that the number changes pretty dramatically. If the cap rate is up by 1.5%, it's almost $100,000 difference in valuation. Now, what your deal is going to trade at, you don't know, because you're usually projecting to sell it 3 to 10 years from the point where you buy it. But that type of swing can have a huge difference. Now, if we added a 0 in the back of this and we were talking millions of dollars, you're literally talking about $1 million difference if you're doing a little bit bigger deal. So just keep that in mind, that people who are underwriting deals can smush that cap rate down and then lead you to believe that you're going to get a huge exit. Why does that matter, Jerome? Okay, well, if I'm cash flowing, let's just use the best one. If I'm cash flowing almost $10,000 a year and I'm able to change the valuation by $100,000, I can change that internal rate return, that cash on cash return very dramatically. And when I do that, it makes it look very appealing to you as an investor when in reality, you may not be able to get the pop. If you're doing a reposition deal, If you're doing a reposition deal, you get the biggest payday when you exit, in theory. That big payday comes from the fact that you were able to execute your business plan well. So keep that in mind. You need to understand the cap rate for the asset that's being purchased so that you know if these projections on the valuation are actually accurate. All right. I said it gets better over time. And so let's say that we are increasing our rent and we're increasing our expenses at 5% per year. Is that realistic in this market? It is. When I was doing it back in 2017, it wasn't. And then we saw it and it was like, oh, well, maybe that kid didn't know what he was talking about. So know that rents will go up. You get to decide what the number is. I would tell you that it's not 10%. Even if it happens a couple of years in your market, it's probably going to go back down, right? And so what we said here was, hey, existing average monthly rent is $500. We've got $60,000 of potential income. We saw this, right? Net income is $51,000. What we want to do over the course of the year is take the average monthly rent from $500 to $600. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. But what is not going to happen, and I see this mistake a lot, is you're not going to buy a property that is currently renting at $500 and in the first year increase the rents by $100 per unit per month. It's just not going to happen. It's going to take some time. You got to get people out. You got to get things renovated. You have to be really careful when you're making these adjustments. And so between year one, year two, in the year two, we're getting $72,000 a year in income. And then you got your expenses. Maybe it went down because you were not renovating as aggressively. So your vacancy is less than it was the year before, even though you made more money. Continues year over year over year. It keeps going. Your rents keep going up in concept. And at the end of the day, your net income goes up as well. And your vacancy, I have a really hard time with 10 units saying that my vacancy is less than 10%. So you can do what you want there, but I will tell you that this number is a mess a lot of the times. If you're doing a heavy value add program, you're probably going to have 20 to 30% vacancy while you're doing that program. So be really, really careful when people say, hey, we're going to execute a renovation plan and we're going to have all our units full while we do it. Let me see here. What else can I get to? I feel like I might be boring you guys at this point. So much more, so much more. All right. Before I jump into the exit strategies, let me just look at questions real quick. Elise says, aside questions for personal income planning, do you include an acquisition fee for properties with 100? Elise, yes. So I'm not including all the fees and stuff here because I just wanted to help people figure out how to evaluate the property. I think, an asset management fee would be in there. The acquisition fee would be in there. I will talk about the disposition fee since we're talking about refinancing and capital events. So let me jump into that real quick, right? So this deal I showed you, I don't know if you noticed it. I'll scroll back up just because I want to show you that we're consistent. I said we're going to refinance this thing in year 4, right? So why year 4, Jerome? What are you doing? So I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those guys who does not want to do a refi unless I can get all the money out that we put in. I'm one of those weirdos. There are people out there who will do a refi, return 50% of the capital, and then use that to juice the returns and say, hey, you're making 20% return on your money. And it's like, but your money's still trapped in the deal, right? I don't do a refi unless I can get all the money out of the deal, okay? So here we go. In year 4, we're going to refinance it. My net operating income was about 40 grand. I had a really conservative cap rate. If you remember the chart, I'll show you that just so you can see it. Remember my cap rates, 7.5, the lowest cap rate. I did the lowest one on our little sensitivity chart. Boom, got the 7.5 in there. So my appraised value on my net operating income is 528. Then there's an 80% loan to value on the refi. I probably won't get that. 75 is probably better, but we got 80% in, so we'll deal with it. Interest rates high, the AM is short. So, there are loans that are 15, 20, 25, 30. And on the development deal, we were looking at a 40-year loan. You can't get that for every asset type. So you gotta be really specific on your deal so that you are putting in an appropriate interest rate, loan to value, and amortization. These three right here will have a huge impact on the debt service coverage ratio. And that's, if you remember my pizza example, that 1.25. You want to make sure you got a slice of pizza left, or you're going to be really sad like I was. Because I didn't tell you guys this, but my dog ate the slices. That was mad. Anyway, so the refinance loan amount, right? So 528 at 80%. I think this gives me 422. Then the refinance cost is 2.5% of the deal. You want to repay the outstanding loan balance. So we had 300,000 left. So the 422, the refinance loan amount minus the 300 gives us $109,000 in gross proceeds from the folks that are on the deal. All right. In this situation, you're going to return the member capital. And to illustrate the point, I want to show you there's some money trapped in this deal. So there are no profits from the refi. The only principal that's left is, it's $27,000. So if I was running this deal, I wouldn't do this refi because I couldn't get money out. Now, could I make this work? Yeah. All I got to do is change the cap rate to 6. And then this number would jump up and I would have a surplus here because this refinance loan amount would be, I don't know, 450, 475. And then when you come down here, I would be able to pay all that out. And then you will hear operators talk about, hey, you make money 3 ways. You get your monthly proceed checks from rents. You get refinance. That is not taxable because we're taking a loan out, but we're going to give you your money back and then some profit. And then you'll make money on the exit. This middle one is what we're talking about here. And so if there were profits from this, then we would see those and you would split them based on the folks that are in the deal. And then there's usually some type of capital transaction fee to the person who's leading the deal. And part of the reason why I don't do it is because I can't get my fee. I want a fee if I'm going to go through the rigmarole of doing a refinance because it's a pretty intense process. All right, now let's jump over 10 years after we've owned the deal. It is now worth $722,000. And so if I just jump down to the end instead of breaking everything down, the total cash to members, initial capital plus profit is 351. So we put 120 in, we got 351 back. And then if you just want to figure out how much the profit was, not counting original money in, it's 218. So we were able to put 100 something in, get 200 something back in addition to getting our money back. The fees, I think Marina asked that question, but there's some fees here for exiting the deal to the person who's running it. Members, this would be the LPs if you're syndicating. This is people who just put money in the deal if it's a joint venture. And when I say just put money in the deal, meaning they weren't involved as a manager where they would get some fees. And then the 20% would be maybe for people who sign loans and other stuff. So that's how you can turn 100,000 or 120,000 into 350,000 over the course of 10 years. In the market that we're in, it's happening faster, but know that, again, the cap rate is the thing that determines this. If I drop that cap rate down to 6%, I'm likely to be up in the upper eights with this number, which would dramatically change that. And why do I keep emphasizing that? Because this is when you get your big payday. Forget the $10,000 a year in cash flow. We're talking about six-figure payday. And I'll just show this because this is one of the other tables that we get. And so the average annual return for the deal is 172. The IRR is 22. So people would be pretty excited about this. When I mentioned juicing the returns at the refi, so I refinance it, right? The deal's not doing well. I'm not getting my 8 pref and some of the other stuff that people say. Oh, don't worry about it. We're going to catch up in year 5. Boom. So now I'm giving you 40%. Give you 40% instead of the 7% you were getting because I gave you some of your money back. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me see. Let me see what's in here. Okay. Nicole asks, what happens when you overraise? Those committed still want in, but not enough room. Nicole, I think you're in a great spot because you have the capacity to raise a lot of money. For the majority of people, they're going to get to the closing table and they are not going to have enough money to close their deal, or they're going to have to come make up a shortfall. Most people don't have the problem of over raising on the first deal. So let's assume that you got through the first deal, you went out fishing, you brought it back, you're laying all your tuna out on the deck, and people are like, "Ooh, they made money. I want to go out and go fishing with them again." And so now you got people who are ready to put money in the deal, and maybe you overfund at this point. You really want your deal. You want to tell people, "Hey, sorry, we're not taking any more money," because what happens is people will wait until as late as possible to put money in your deal. They don't want to send it. They don't want to send it. They don't want to send it. I missed my opportunity. And so you want to train the people who, if you're going to do syndications, you want to train them that they need to act as soon as they can so that they don't miss out on that opportunity. And you tell them, "Hey, we don't know when the next deal's coming up, but we'll keep you involved on our progress." And you, as soon as you don't need their money, that's when they want to give it to you more than anything else. I think I answered Elisa's question. Dolly, thank you. Um, will you be talking about lease audits at some point? No. I mean, the due diligence piece of this is outside of the underwriting. And so what's a lease audit? A lease audit is you go through and you look at the leases by the that the owner has. Is it important? Yes, you want to make sure that the leases say that the leases are consistent with whatever the rent roll says, because I can put anything I want to in a spreadsheet. Where can we get the pro forma? You can jump on to search Michael Blank syndicated deal analyzer and you can get it. There's a bunch of different ones out there. I just use Michael's because that's the one I started with. Rob Beardsley has one, and a bunch of other folks have their own. I just use Mike's because I listened to every podcast episode he had when I was getting into the space. Let's see. How can the cap rate change if the property class is determined up front? So, Crystal, the cap rate changes because other properties in the market are selling for a higher price with less net operating income. So the cap rate would be determined, I guess it's the other way. Less net operating income, higher number on the denominator, the valuation, the sales price. You divide those two, that gives you cap rate. And so what happens is people are spending more money, sales price, to get a smaller amount of cash flow. And so that will lower the cap rate, which increases the value of your property. All right. More questions. Lawrence, I'm over time. I'm sorry, brother, but
listen, that's okay. Listen, that great info. That you've given a lot of content here. I hope everybody's been writing stuff down. And if they want any more information, they contact you. How they contact you, though?
Yeah, I mean, Georgie's here. Part of the reason Georgie's here is she helps me. And so, look, I get some formal education in the end. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, get a complete system of education in the end. We've got an 11-week course. It's self-paced. It's virtual. We'll answer all your questions. There's a number of people in here who've been through it, and I think they would say that it's this on steroids, because not only are we talking about figuring out how to underwrite the deal, but we're teaching you how to operate the deal. We're giving you the systems you need in order to find deals and what you need to take to the bank in the form of a business plan and so on and so forth. So many people get into this space. They don't want to spend any money for education, but I think the vast majority of the people here have some form of formal education, post high school, or some type of licensure. And I I listened to 40 hours of content a week, and it was the most inefficient, ineffective way to figure out how to do this thing. And so, if you're thinking about doing multifamily in a big way, if you want to make it part of your exit plan, you can save yourself years of turmoil and strife and grief by getting educated before you do a deal. We're doing a conference February 18th through the 20th. You It's not a boot camp. It is a multifamily investing conference. Sometimes I get feedback of, well, we want more of the education stuff. You can't learn this stuff in a night. You can't learn it in 3 days. Like, there are people who do boot camps, but you don't walk out of the boot camp ready to do anything because there was too much information. We spread it out over the course of 3 months so that people can actually do the homework, understand what they don't understand, because you don't understand it all. I don't care how smart you are, and then ask questions about it so that you can actually get to the place where you can apply this thing. So we got the course. You can talk to Georgie. She's here to help out. And then in addition to that, I come to conference. If you don't do anything else, if you're tired of thinking you can do it and you want proof that you can do it, we've put together a lineup of speakers that look like you, right? And it doesn't matter what background you're from. That's why I can say it with so much confidence. It doesn't matter what background that you're from. There's somebody speaking who looks like you that proves that if you think race is a reason why you can't be successful in this, that's eliminated. If you think your sex is a reason why you can't be successful in this, it's eliminated. Super important for me. Vish, you're the man. I appreciate you still being on, man. I figured you would have dropped off 10 minutes after. Um, so yeah, I mean, between me and Georgie, we can get you guys situated on either one conference link. And I don't know. I feel bad, but I think it will help people. So the
You
conferences,
feel, this is a great presentation, Jerome. Thank you very much.
the conference is MyersMethods.com Win 2022. And it's intentionally titled that because I think this is the year where deals are going to trade in a way where you can actually make money, right? You can buy something that's a lead and be in this perpetual cycle and never make any money because you can't increase net operating income. It doesn't cash flow because you pay too much for it. And you just end up in this ugly, ugly, ugly spot. David, the session was recorded, man.
It will be up on YouTube. My YouTube channel. I put the YouTube channel in the chat. Jerome, thank you again for making this presentation and also giving the information in a digestible manner. A lot of times we get sometimes you get people, maybe the people are listening here, right?
Yeah.
Mouth wide
It's
open.
not my goal. Lawrence, I appreciate you saying that, man. It's not my goal to show anybody how smart I am. Like, I could go super deep with, I can talk to anybody about this stuff. I don't care if they have a PhD. I don't care if they have 40 years of experience. My goal is to help people be able to take this stuff, and if worst case scenario, You got to put the www on it, David. I'm not sure which one you're trying to do, but I want people to protect. This presentation is so you can protect yourself. There's a whole lot of people offering deals, and if you don't know what you're investing in, you can end up in a place where your capital is trapped. You can end up in a place where your capital is trapped for 3, 5, 10 years, and you're just stuck. And it took you, I don't know, let's call it 10 years to save the money. So now what do? Just earn some more? It makes me so sad.
So are there any more questions?
Crystal asked a question about that. So Crystal, like,
okay.
The people who have been through our course are in a group chat. We've got Facebook groups, and you can connect with those folks. I mean, Lawrence is a part of that community, right? And depending on the market that you're in, there may be somebody there that's interested in your deal. Because we have a common language, because we are all interested in actually improving the community and not just focus on figuring out how to make money, we feel comfortable doing deals with each other. And so we invite people into that community, but there are some gates so that you can actually come to that community and have real conversations. And so, the course, I think, is a logical step if you're not already indoctrinated in some other program. And I think that's the fastest way that you find your tribe.
Any other questions? Okay, Jerome, thank you very much again for the presentation. Thank you for taking time out to come on Financial Independence through Small Multifamily Investing, and for giving a clear, concise presentation on underwriting. Appreciate you.
Thank you, bro. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with your community, man. It's just amazing to see how much this has grown. I remember when you and I first talked about creating this environment, and I'm just amazed at your ability to continue to bring people close to you. And I know it's a function of just your warm heart and how you execute against the 4 Ps, man. So thanks for having me 2 weeks in a row. I feel like I've been hogging the mic. I got to get out of the way.
Hey, Jerome, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful presentation on 101 underwriting. That was, give me 1 second.
Thank you, Rachel. You're close. We got to connect.
I'm sorry about that, Jerome.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Go ahead, Vish.
Yeah,
love on me, man. I'm here to receive all the love, man. I want to be like you when I grow up.
Well, thank you for taking time to walk us through that fantastic underwriting. So that was you literally broke it down into simple math and walked us through. That was extremely that was really good. That 5-minute evaluation of a property, man, hats off to you. That was good.
I pull out the thing. I pull out the phone calculator, man.
Right.
And I get them with this.
Right.
And then I let them go through the negotiation. It takes me about 10 seconds to get through it, and we're ready to rock and roll and negotiate now.
The amount of value you gave in the last 1 hour, it was definitely worth it, every second of it, because if anyone wanting to join any of this mastermind groups, I'm sure the same thing those mastermind groups would have charged quite a bit.
They do. And I mean, with that said, though, if let's look at the value proposition, right? If you're looking at a deal that could potentially net you on this small 10-unit deal a couple of $100,000 over the course of a few years, where else can you do that?
Right.
And so making that investment so that you actually know what you're doing, because it can go the other way, right, Vish? Like, everybody doesn't make money on every deal every single time. And it's usually because they don't know what they're doing.
Right. And then what you're telling is you You make money when you buy the deal because you operating is the next challenge, and selling is like gambling. The properties might appreciate or may not appreciate. That's gambling. But you do this math well ahead of time, even before you put in an LOI. That makes all the difference. All the difference. Thank you, Jerome, once again.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, Lawrence, for bringing him on. That's
You're welcome, Vish. It's good seeing you. Good
right.
seeing you.
Good to see you guys. All right, thanks.
All right. So once again, Jerome, I thank you again for coming on. Appreciate everybody coming, and also appreciate everybody who came here to participate in the quest for knowledge. Thank you.